good morning, and welcome to the Christian Indie Writers Podcast, where we encourage, inform, and support Christian indie writers on their journey toward publication. I'm Jennifer Carl-Tong, and I write historical Christian romance.
I'm Christina Catane, and I write in multiple genres, including Christian, dystopian fiction.
I'm Jamie Hirschberger. I write short fiction under the pen name J.R. Nichols.
I'm Rhonda Hagerman, and I write fiction and nonfiction.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. For all of you that are listening live, and a big thank you to all of our listeners on iTunes, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, everywhere, all the other platforms where we make our audio available. YouTubers, if you like what you are seeing, please remember to like and subscribe below. You can also go over to our website and subscribe to our newsletter, which will ensure that you will never miss a single episode of the Christian Indie Writers Podcast. We like to start each episode with a segment that we call What's Up. It's time to check in with one another and to see where we are with our writing and our personal lives. So I'm going to start with you, Rhonda. What's up?
Well, what's up with me right at this moment is that I've decided I'm going to embrace my quarantine here, or my stay-at-home here. It is so frizzy, and I'm just having a hard time really doing anything with it right now. I really would like to get my hair cut.
I cut Joelle's hair. I cut like this much off of it.
So, did you really? Wow.
She asked me to, and it looks I watched a video. I watched a YouTube video. Now I could open a salon now. Just saying.
Yeah, that's great. I'll be right over.
All right.
Yeah, my daughter has had long hair, like below her butt, long hair forever. Well, since 5th grade, I think, is when she really quit having it cut, and she just cut 10 inches off of her hair.
Wow.
It's shoulder length now. Oh my word, I just can't. It's crazy.
All right, what about you, Tina?
Well, I will never come to your salon. Just so you know. Because I have
my salon.
naturally curly hair, and I have trouble finding professionals that can cut it properly. So, yeah, the stay-at-home order is over, in case you didn't know, Rhonda. They
No hair
lifted it.
salons.
Are the salons open right now though?
I don't know about salons, but
they're not.
You don't have to be quarantined. You can go out in the air and let the wind blow through your frizzies.
Maybe I'll do that right now.
Hey,
that's not a good time.
I wasn't clicked on the comments, but Piper says, I watch YouTube videos to give myself layers. It's called the unicorn cut. I'm telling you, I could do this for you.
No.
Cut? Well, now I'm intrigued.
And Tina, come on. Don't you
No,
love me
I
enough to
don't.
give me a try?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't know. I don't really have much to say about what's up, except for we got our new camper, and we're going to go camping.
Yay!
This summer, a lot.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I know you were really excited buying all of the goodies to outfit it and things like that. So it's going to be a lot of fun to get out there in the open road.
Just have to fix the Wi-Fi issue of how I'm going to get online.
Yeah.
And other than that, we're all good to go.
That's awesome. All right, before we move on to you, Jamie, Jason says his What's Up. I wrote the turning point in my book. Yay.
All right.
It was the most emotional scene I've written. That's perfect for today's episode, Jason. On a side note, don't write emotional scenes outside. People give you weird looks if you are crying. Yeah, that's so very true. Okay, Jamie. Oh, we got people saying. All right. So, one more thing from Jason. Also started going through the book, Rhonda.
Yay!
I hope it's helping you.
All right, Jamie, what's up with you?
I don't have any idea what I should say about what's up with me. Guess what I discovered? I discovered that when you're editing, if you want to be able to say I've edited 2 chapters instead of 1.5 chapters, you could just split the second chapter in half, and poof, you've edited 2 chapters instead of 1.5. So
it's magic.
Yes, that is my editing tip of the day.
Is that Common Core math?
Yeah. Right. So anyway, I was very excited to get to a place in a particular chapter. I'm like, great, it's good so far. And then I realized, holy cow, this chapter is so long, I could easily divide these. So happy day for me. I now am feeling very ahead of the game.
That's awesome.
That's wonderful.
Shell says her what's up. I got my first official rejection on my short story. Congratulations,
Yes,
Shell.
congrats.
I got back some great notes and we'll definitely try again.
Good
Awesome.
for you.
That
That's what you
Good
do.
for you for getting back on the horse. That's awesome.
And
Sage
how
said,
awesome that they gave her notes and
I
didn't
agree.
just reject it. Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Sage says I got my Fiverr set up and I have some
Mm.
freelance work lined up and I haven't done anything creative all week. Well,
Hmm.
those are bad weeks. I have those weeks too. Piper says back to work a few days a week. I'm in healthcare and it's changed to doing home visits, so I have to watch my coffee intake. No public bathroom.
Oh,
Never
yeah.
thought about that. Oh my
Yeah,
word.
really.
Never heard of this thing called Depends?
Oh,
Oh.
Just kidding.
oh my word.
If I had
Oh,
to give up coffee or where it depends, I don't know. That's a toss up.
I know. I might have to choose.
Mhm.
It depends, actually. Yeah. So my what's up, we talked a little bit off air. We have been, for those of you who don't know, we keep office hours with each other, like about 4 or 5 days a week. And my heart has just been heavy for what's been going on in our world, especially in our nation here in America, in the United States. And I started to tell the ladies this story, and I thought that I would hold it for my what's up. When I was in college, I had a friend who was African American, and we went shopping to Neiman Marcus. I'd never been to Marcus. I didn't know why I had never been to Neiman Marcus until I walked in the store and saw the price tags, and then I realized really fast why I had never been to Neiman Marcus.
I one time heard someone call it needless markups, and I never thought of
Oh,
it any other way again.
Oh, such a great name!
I love
Right,
that.
beautiful stuff. But don't get me wrong. But I went to college to a rich kid school. No joke. I went as the poster child for financial aid. We were not rich. But this gentleman, both parents were doctors, and he had a monthly stipend from his parents. I didn't get a monthly stipend. I had a job. And, anyways, he just went in to replace a pair of shoes that he was wearing. He just wanted the same exact pair of shoes. He's already wearing a pair that were worn out. And we go in there, and he's dressed nice, and I'm wearing a no joke ripped jeans and a college sweatshirt. My hair, I wear a baseball cap. I'm not sure I'd showered because I didn't know where we were going. And I was like the typical, college student at that point. And we go in there, and the very nicely dressed woman in the shoe department came to me and said, "Is there something I can help you with?" And I'm like, "Oh no, I'm just with him. I'm not buying anything." I was like petrified, like, "Oh, please don't put me in some shoes that I'm gonna feel like I have to buy." Like, no, no, no.
Mhm.
And she's like, "Oh, okay." And she didn't go over to him. And I said, "No, he's the one that's shopping." She's like, um, "Okay." And then she walked away, and he couldn't get anyone to wait on him. This kid, no joke, and this is back in the 90s, had a $1,500 stipend from his parents every month.
Hmm.
I'm like, and just to shop. This is everything else is paid for. So that was my first experience. And so when we left there, I was just like, I don't understand what just happened. And he was like shocked. He's like, you don't understand what just happened? I'm black and you're white. And that was my very first time. And I don't think that it was because and I've talked with some friends this week. I have friends that are that have biracial children, that are in marriages, that are, and I feel like I see their families the same as I see my family, but that's not the problem. That's what I'm realizing because I'm learning a lot right now. What I have seen is that the fact that I don't see the difference. I don't see I don't see their experience. That's the difference. So my heart's just been really heavy this week because I feel like I'm educating myself so much more. I thought I was educated and I feel like I'm not. And so lots of conversations with my girls who are just confused because they have a lot of friends that are different races and they don't understand why there's a problem with any of this. So it's been a big, huge learning experience for me this week with my girls these past couple weeks. And so, yeah, so that's my what's up is I've just really had a heavy heart. You may not have seen me really doing anything on social media other than sharing things that kind of inspire me and like that. But I think it's because I'm just kind of stepping back and feeling this out, and figuring out really what to teach my kids. There will be people that protest, right? And there will be people that change our laws, and there will be people that vote, and there'll be people that there's all kinds of things that you'll do. But there'll be people also that just stay home and educate their kids. And I kind of feel like that's where I'm at right now. So,
And also being mindful of how you react to people.
mhm.
I live in a neighborhood with a lot of Black people in our neighborhood, and I kind of find myself I noticed myself not meeting the eyes of men that would be walking down the street. And I've really been thinking about that. Like, why is that?
Yeah.
And doing some self inventory, I guess.
Because as Christian women, I also guard myself. Like, I don't make eye contact with other men anyway. Kind of. I really guard myself. Like, I never will ride in a car, even if it's a friend. Like, unless there's another person there. Like, because it looks bad, right? There's all these reasons. But really, I think that we have to examine ourselves. I appreciate you saying that, Tina. And Tina, I mean, you're in inner city. You and your husband are inner city pastors. You worked at a mission, and now you do a non-traditional, like, online, but it's inner city, and it's not just black, it's not just white. I see you guys ministering to everybody in the Flint area, and I just really appreciate the work you guys do. I've always appreciated it, but I don't think I say it enough. But
Thank you.
you have a perspective that I don't, and I appreciate that too. So, okay. Let's see. I'm just trying to see if there's any. Piper says that she's educating herself as well. Appreciate that. We all need to. Sage says there is so much lacking in all of our educations, and we can never understand those experiences, but that's just more reasons to educate ourselves. Agreed. We're never all going to agree on everything. Like, even around this table right here, I don't think we all can say that we agree politically on every political thing, just because we're all Christians. I mean, there's going to be differences, but as educating yourself, I think, is what's important. All right. Well, let's move on, because today is going to be kind of a little bit heavier episode than what we normally do anyway. I told the ladies before this started that when I messaged a friend of mine this week, I shared my heart with her about how much I love her and been praying for her. But I started it off with a snarky remark, and then I ended it with a snarky remark, because apparently I have a hard time being, like, genuinely honest and heartfelt without, like, feeling too exposed. I don't know why I do that. Do you guys do that ever? Like,
Oh yeah.
Not me. I never hide my emotions with sarcasm.
whatever.
Ever.
You're the queen of it.
I think the sarcasm alert is going off as we speak.
Right. So
I
I'm
think
gonna,
the whole ideal of being someone who laughs at funerals is a trope for a reason. I mean, I think it's a pretty common experience too, dealing with difficult stuff. I'm the class clown at every CPR first aid class that we ever go to, because I deal with it by making jokes.
right. So, all right. So I'm glad I'm not the only one. So I'm gonna try very hard not to be too snarky, but at the same time too, this is just who we are, right? So today we're going to talk about how art imitates life. It's our first episode in this series, and we realize that there are different aspects of our life in which we experience that carry over into our art. So what are the salient points about art imitating life?
Well, I think that that's how art moves people. It's because it resonates with something that is a common experience. So when you consume art that is telling a truth, basically, about something fundamental to humanity, I think that's when art is considered, quote unquote, good, because it's impactful.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate too, Jamie. I think of all people in my life, art affects your work and your life, but you have a knowledge of how, like, art does. Like, I might watch a movie or read a book or see a painting and it might affect me, but I don't, like, cognitively realize that. And you have this great awareness of how art does affect you. And I really appreciate that about you.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Anyone else have any comments?
Well, Jamie kind of covered what I was going to say.
I stole your answer.
But I was just going to say it way more simply and just say, when we can touch on what people have felt, the emotions that somebody has experienced, and we can touch on that, we only need to touch it, because it'll bring the whole experience back to them.
Yeah.
By just a touch.
Yes,
and that will be
totally
an emotional
agree.
experience for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's really an art to know how much is too much. If you're describing something emotion, or you know what I'm saying, because it's definitely an art itself to describe it sort of just so.
Mm-hmm.
And it affects our writing too. Like, when we've talked in past episodes about how to make your characters real.
Mm-hmm.
have you guys ever had that experience with your own writing where you had a character that didn't feel very real and you realized it was because it was lacking trauma?
Yeah, well, there's this old phrase is, you don't want to have a Mary Sue in your book. And Mary Sue is just a basically good person who never has a flaw and never does anything wrong. And I have a character, her name is Moxie Callahan. And in the beginning, she was just a big old Mary Sue. And I was a new writer, hadn't ever heard that phrase before. But my thought process going into my first draft was that she was like a straight man character. And I wasn't really realizing that there's a difference between a lifeless character and a straight or morally upright character, because even a straight man is going to have foibles and flaws and things that make him aggravating to people who are not so straight-laced and uptight, for example. So you have to be careful not to make your people just too generic because they're not enough like a real life person.
Right. Agreed. You also have to be careful that you don't make them so unlikable that in a writing group at Tim Hortons that Rhonda will call you out and say she hates your main character.
Well,
It was
you were
true.
making her nicer.
You are never going to live that down, Rhonda.
No.
No, because all right, so she's never going to live it down because it was the best advice that I could have ever gotten at that point right there. Because I went the opposite direction. I wanted my character to be so real. I wanted to show that you can love God and be answering His call and still be imperfect. Well, she was just way too imperfect because I wasn't giving reason. I wasn't. James or Rhonda was able to point out to me that like, why is she being like this to him? And I'm like, oh, you can't see why. Like, I'm not being as obvious about why. And so that again, I didn't show enough of her drama. And it just took like one sentence. Do you remember? I think the one sentence was it was after like she's like, Will Caffey, the boy who had pulled her hair and chased her in the playground. Like, where as a reader, we're like, oh, he likes her, but she didn't see it that way. Like, it just took like one sentence for us to be like, oh,
Yeah, because after you added that, I reread it. You hadn't told me what change you made. When I reread it, it completely changed my mindset.
so
Reading her attitude.
So not to get off topic, but yes. So like I agree with everything Jamie is saying about not having a Mary Sue character, but also make sure you don't go the opposite extreme like I did.
And the answer to your question for me is a big yes, but I think we're going to get into the why of that later.
Okay.
In the podcast.
So we know that it'll affect your characters. Will it affect like other things like settings or like your like the plot line? Do you think that like putting trauma into your story will affect those things as well?
I think it's like a symbiotic sort of a thing, because when trauma occurs, you go to the hospital or a fireman shows up, or, I mean, I don't know. We talk about disasters don't have to be things like hurricane or whatever. But when you add trauma or a bad situation to a story, it is going to affect both ways. It's symbiotic. So the characters are going to have trauma in particular settings, and particular settings can affect how your characters react to a trauma. I mean, if a trauma happens in a restaurant, you might look around and beg someone to call 911, as opposed to if you're alone with someone and tragedy strikes. So yeah, it's totally going to affect all of those things.
Right. Sage says, I think this is what is actually meant when people say, write what you know. Use what you've experienced when you're writing, because when you make things personal, you make them universal. That is very good. The universal thing, yeah. Piper says, I think that using the emotion that whatever trauma has caused can be better for the plot than necessarily using all the detail of the trauma. Very good. And that would be the core of really getting to good writing, wouldn't it?
The nice thing about human emotion is that everybody experiences pretty much the same thing, or, the same feelings, maybe not the same circumstances.
Right.
And kind of touching on what Tina had brought up earlier, it's nice that you can just sort of touch on it and not go into too much detail, because it's like the reader is helping you write the story because they're inserting themselves into that when it jogs their memory of a trauma that was similar to that they went through.
Right. I'm glad that you said that, because when we get to sharing our sprints today, my sprint, I don't know that I would say it's a trauma, but it was a trauma, and it's something that like when you say that, like, we don't experience the same things, but we have the same feelings, this will kind of, like, I was inspired to write this because of the things that kind of have been happening in our life. Not that I'm trying to say that I've experienced what like the racism that others that I know have experienced, but there have been like prejudices against me in certain ways to where it helps me to understand a little bit more, I think. And if we can reach down deep inside of us and be able to write these things, then people that don't understand what it's like to be a white woman, let's say, that's overweight, maybe can understand it a little bit if we're able to really expose the trauma that we went through. So, but we'll see that later. So, all right, what if you write fantasy or some other genre? Should you throw this out the window since like it's such a different, like you're creating your own world?
I don't think so, because you can, having to fight down a fire-breathing dragon can be traumatic. And that fear and all that stuff that happens, those same emotions are in play. As if, we were in war in real life, or, you almost get hit by a car or whatever that might be. You can still feel those emotions.
Excuse me. I mean, I agree. Why does The Secret of Nim work? It's because it's about a bunch of rats having human experiences and human emotion, going through human drama. We like to think we like movies or shows about animals. No, we like movies or shows about animals dealing with human experiences and the different kinds of reactions that they would give opposed to a human. My point sort of being like a fantasy situation isn't going to change because Jennifer loves to talk about how if they don't care about your characters, they're not going to care about your story. And the experiences of your characters are what's going to be important. Of course, you can have a mouse that acts like a mouse. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just sort of
read that.
Right, exactly. Unless it's like someone's pet and it's part of a story, but
then you're still bringing it back to the human experience.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Can I just bring up Jason's comment? The big trauma in my book is the turning point in the middle. So the traumas, where do we use them in the book?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, it really depends. It was really interesting because I had missed, okay, the daily audio Bible app is going through Solomon right now and whatever, King David. I didn't realize that King David had a son who had been dropped or fell upon, like the nurse fell upon him when they were fleeing, and he was crippled from life. So in his story, the trauma would have happened in the beginning and potentially impacted. Let's say you're going to write a story of historical fiction about this king or, heir of David. You would have to like make that trauma impact everything going forward in that character's life. So it depends on the story, and what the trauma is doing for your story will determine where the trauma has to happen.
Right. And this guy started with a name like Melchizedek. I mean, if that wasn't traumatic enough. Melchizedek. Oh, I can't say it right now. All right. Let's move on.
And I think too that like it depends, like Jamie said, it's going to depend on your story and what the trauma is going to do in your story. A trauma can show up, for example, in my book, which is already out. So I'm hoping I don't like spoil it for anyone, but there's a character that dies in Avoiding Esther, and that trauma is a turning point. Yes, and it's one of my the plot points that moves the plot forward, but it's not throughout the whole book. So I guess it depends on what kind of trauma it is, because in my last book of this series, which no one's read except for some you ladies have read some of it, her trauma happens before the story even starts, and it affects her character throughout the whole thing. And the whole time you're wondering, why is she so different than the other two sisters? And so you don't find out till later, but then there's a moment of where it comes to the surface. So I agree. I think that it really is going to depend on your story.
It reminds me a lot of the discussion about the shattering moment in A Short Piece. It's a very similar advice.
Right. I agree.
Thank you, Shell. Mephibosheth. That's correct.
What is it?
Mephibosheth.
All right. Okay. So then let's talk a little bit about some specifics, right? So there are different types of trauma. We kind of talked about that, started talking about that a little bit. I don't think that every time you use a trauma, it needs to be huge. So let's start off with like little traumas. Can we start there first and then we'll move on to bigger things?
Oh yeah, like lost dog or
Yes.
Or
lost
job.
kitty,
Right.
Or job.
lost
A job.
job.
Right.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have to be just because it's small doesn't mean it has to take a
Mhm.
small, or maybe it's just because it has a small
Mhm.
role doesn't mean that the emotion has to be small. Does that make sense?
Yep. Like if
Like,
a friend moves away. Like if you're a
Mhm.
teenager, your
Aw.
friend moves away,
Oh,
so they move. You'll see them again. You'll write. Well, you probably won't write letters these days, but it's not the end of the world. But to a teenager, it
my
really is.
during this quarantine, my girls have been writing letters to their friends
Oh,
and
well,
like
good. Oh, I'm
that's
so
sweet.
it's been
happy.
part of the curriculum and they got letters from their friends. It's been this curriculum has been really great that we're doing.
I love that.
If anyone's interested, message me offline. I'll share with you what the curriculum is. But yeah, it's been very good. So yeah, I think it's a lost art form. But
When I was in elementary school, the school was divided into pods. And so you were in pod 1 or pod 2. And pod 1 and pod 2 had all the same grades in each pod, but they had different lunch times and different recess times. So my best friend and I had been in the same classroom really from kindergarten through 3rd grade. And in 4th grade, they changed her to the other pod.
oh
And it was horrible.
golly.
So
That's
something like
hard.
that
So
seems
that's
like
still a
really small, but to a 4th grader, that's huge.
It's huge. Like I could write a story about what my son, who just graduated from Olivet Nazarene University, who worked so hard to get to college. It was a financial stretch for us, and then now, COVID-19 happens, and he doesn't get to finish out his semester the way he planned. He doesn't get to walk and get his diploma. Like everything is different now. That's still a trauma. That
Mhm.
it's a different kind of trauma, but that could still be an emotional thing that you talk about, in your book.
Mhm.
Again, so in the person that passed away in my book, Avoiding Esther, if I had not lost she is patterned greatly on a mixture of my grandmother and my aunt who just recently passed away. Though I wrote that book before my aunt passed away. But had I not lost my grandmother, I don't know that I would have been as an emotional scene as what I wrote it. I would have tried, but I think I was able to pull from a well that didn't exist before I lost someone
Mhm.
that meant a whole lot to me. And the
Mhm.
first time that Jamie read it, right after I sprinted it, basically, and it brought it got a little bit of an emotional reaction from her. That meant a lot to me, and I knew that I had clicked onto something. So, okay, little bit off a track. I don't want to mispronounce your name. Agugwa. I'm probably wrong, but it says, I know your voice is from your podcast. It's so cool to see your face. It's sorry to interrupt. Go ahead. I'm listening. Trauma. Sweetheart. Oh, we're so glad
Awesome.
to have you here with us.
Mhm.
Sage says, my sister experienced trauma at the end of every school year when she had to move on to the next class with new
Aw.
teachers. She has
Mhm.
never been great with change. My girls would have been the same way if they weren't able to be in a special program. My girls are very shy. They're so much better now, but when they're little, like anxiety and the fact that they were able to move with the same kids has made a big difference. So yeah, that
Mhm.
again, depending on what age group you're writing about, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
all right, let's get some. I'm sorry, you're gonna say something, Rhonda?
No, I was just going to say that, the stereotype of writers back when I was younger, before I really started trying to write, is that you have to experience life before you could have anything to write.
Mhm.
And that's not completely true, but I mean, it is a little bit true because you do draw so much from your own experience, like you were talking about with your grandma.
Right. Agreed. Okay. So a little bit earlier here, I'm going to go back and try to find it. Sage says, I've been avoiding writing the trauma in basically all of my stories, which explains
Oh
why I'm
yeah.
not getting anywhere
Yep.
with them. Is there
I
I'm
have
right
anyone?
there with you, Sage.
I was going to say, is there anyone here in this foursome that has anything to say about that?
I
Yeah.
I do
definitely
not
have
like
something to
hurting
say
my
about that.
characters. Yeah.
Go ahead, Tina. You want to share?
Well, I think we wanted to talk a little bit about why we did this episode to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
I've been struggling with my story, and you guys kind of recognized something that I didn't, and you recognized that my main character was very much like me, and including the trauma that she experiences in the story.
Well, I mean, particularly, like you are not, well, I mean, you are from Alaska, but you're not a native, person living in post-apocalyptic, Old Testament only society. specifically it was the emotional part where we felt that she was you, right? Specifically, it was her traumas that you shared.
Right. And so it helped my writing in that it inspired the whole story. But it also hinders it because of the difficulty of dealing with the trauma. So I guess I should explain a little bit. I have what's called attachment trauma, and they also call it reactive attachment disorder because I was born in a psychiatric hospital to a mother who was mentally ill. I was there for 6 days, and my name was Carol. Then I was put into foster care for almost 2 years, and they called me Robin. And then at that time, my biological mother finally came to terms with she wasn't getting better, and she relinquished her parental rights, and I was adopted, and they changed my name to Christina. So that was a trauma. That whole situation, from the first relinquishment of being taken from my mother, to the name changes, to changing caregivers. I don't know how many times I just changed caregivers during foster care. And so that developed in me this coping mechanism where I heard a doctor say that somebody with my form, it's called complex PTSD because I don't have a pre-trauma self. So like my son-in-law who was in the war in Iraq and was in a Humvee that got hit an IED and everybody died but him. He has a memory of who he was before that trauma and who he knows who he is now. I have no memory of who I was. That basically I wasn't anybody before my trauma because I hadn't developed a sense of self yet. So I had no pre-trauma self. And so this doctor said, a newborn baby, their mother is like God to them because they are completely dependent on their mother for everything, including who they are. And so being abandoned by your mother is like, he compared it to being abandoned by God. And so you spend your life with this fear. And so since I have no cognitive memory of it and no pre-trauma self, all my triggers are emotional. And so anything that stirs up an emotion that reminds me of the trauma triggers the PTSD: freeze, fawn, fight, or flee. And fawn is like when you get really clingy, and the other ones are self-explanatory. But so over time, I got really good at reading people. If they did anything that I thought was going to cause them to reject me in any way, that would be like a trigger for me. And I would either sabotage that relationship or just walk away or whatever I would do. But over time, my brain said, these extreme emotions that you're feeling are dangerous. And so what it would do is when I start to feel extreme emotion, it would just shut it down. Disassociation, I believe, is the psychological term for that. So that is kind of like how I deal with life. I'm 51 years old, and for 51 years, that's what my brain has done.
And so when we read about Angelica, who her trauma is that her mother is apart from her and she is seeking her, correct?
Right. And also she feels abandoned by God because she feels unforgiven.
And she's searching for his word, and she's searching for the truth about him. Like it all added up to us, because Tina had shared this with us years ago when we first kind of became close. And so we as her writing group could see it from the beginning. Well, this is Tina's story in more ways than one, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know that Tina saw it at first because it was yeah. And so this is where Tina struggles, is that because when she starts to get an emotional response, she either is flight or fall, like she has these that writing those scenes is difficult for her. And that's what we're here for, is to really help her as her friend, to help her like when she is struggling with that, but also to help her just to be able to write those scenes, just like this, the specifics of writing it, but also beyond that, right, Tina? That when you are able to write those things, you're gonna kind of need us just to know
Yeah.
that we're not going anywhere.
I figured out that when I tried to write a scene, and I thought, oh, I'll do it as a sprint because I seem to be really good at writing these sprints and getting into the, without really thinking about it, I can get into this descriptive emotion and all this stuff. But when I tried to do that with Angelica, it came back telling every time.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured out it's because, like, in my life, when I'm experiencing extreme emotions, it's almost like I'm outside myself watching. And that's how I wrote those scenes, outside of Angelica watching. And so I came to figure out that I cannot write an entire scene of Angelica at once. I have to break it down into moments. So, like when she's going through a purification, right, in the story, and her body has to be completely shaved. The moment where she's standing in front, her father's the high priest, and he's pronouncing this punishment to her. That moment, I had to write that moment. And what we were talking about earlier, where you just have to touch on the emotion, I figured out that that's what I could do. That I could go back in my mind and I could connect with those split second or that one moment where I actually felt whatever it is I was feeling.
Yes.
Before my brain shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
And I could touch on that.
Yes.
And then I could show the disassociative process in Angelica.
Perfect. Because really it was so interesting to kind of go through the edits, because your book is very much about Angelica's growth and all of these things. So you really have to kind of go there in this book. Like you can't, fluff along with her emotions. And so it was interesting because I didn't quite know how to explain to you, don't just tell me she was upset. And without you having those little moments like you're describing to kind of narrate, like I'm not in your head to find those nuggets. So I'm so glad and excited to see these edits now, because those little personal experiences are going to come in there and make those moments just really hurt me the way that they hurt Angelica, which will make the story more compelling.
Right, which is really awesome that I can just touch that emotion, and my readers will be able to draw from their own.
Yes, and sometimes you can do things. Yeah, sometimes you can do things like change the pacing. You can make your sentences shorter if people are anxious. You can make them longer if people are more relaxed. If people are running around, again, shorter, choppier sentences, people being interrupted, people wincing and grimacing, and physical reactions too. You don't always have to talk about how a trauma is making a person feel. She felt, she thought isn't always the best way to talk about a trauma that's happening. Just some more tips there.
Yep, agreed. Tina, you're going to need to go back and read all these comments that are here for you.
Yes.
Very encouraging. I do want to highlight one of them. Sage says, thank you for sharing that, Tina. That makes so much sense now for me as well. I have a disassociation disorder, and I never connected that with my writing issues before. And like, I just have chills now, because like, this is the whole reason we do this podcast, was because there are people that are not as far along in their journey as we are, and we are like educating each other, and just love that like that you and Tina are able to connect on a level that like we never even thought before we started this podcast. We thought we were going to be talking about basics and things like that
and stuff.
Yeah, and comma, yes, and where to put the quote marks again, and so I just really appreciate that. I also, in light of how I like to be a little bit snarky, Sage also said earlier, "Oh, you are so not a Carol, Tina."
I agree.
I know she's not, because I've seen her husband. So, moving on.
What does my husband have to do with anything?
Oh,
I don't know.
I'm so glad you guys don't know. I've not seen it. There is a TV show on Netflix that's just terrible. But there's a woman named Carol that, it's strange what happened to her husband. Nobody knows. Just saying. So,
okay.
All right, ladies.
Not yet, anyway.
Not yet. As of today, he's safe. All right. I really appreciate your heart, Tina.
Me
Is there
too.
anything else that you wanted to say before we move on?
I just think, the Bible's in Romans 8:28, it says, God will work all things out for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose.
Amen.
And so I feel like God didn't put me through that whole experience, but he turned to help me turn it around and make it into something positive.
Amen. And you've already made it a positive, helping one of our listeners kind of see something in herself too. So I appreciate that.
What a blessing.
Definitely a blessing.
I'm glad I could help.
Speaking of blessings, before we move on, I just want to point something out that I almost would not have noticed, but one of our listeners, Shell, who is very active in our YouTube chat, switched over to Facebook recently to welcome our new listener, our new viewer, and
Aw.
said, welcome.
Aw.
So she was already on YouTube, saw that we were talking to somebody on Facebook, must have seen that somehow, and then she flipped over there. And Shell, we appreciate you. We appreciate all of our chatters. I have goosebumps. Just so blessed by just the camaraderie and the friendships that are growing here, and how everybody shares with each other and encourages each other. And this is what we want. When there's so much negative in social media out there, I feel like this is the safe place that everybody can come and be encouraged and encourage each other. And you encourage us when you do things like that.
Absolutely. We really appreciate it.
Okay. Well, it is now time for the feeding of the backs. It is feedback time, and here's a reminder how our feedback works. On this podcast, we submit a raw, fresh, unedited piece. We right before the podcast starts, we go ahead and do ours, unless you or Jamie and we're itching to do it last week, so we let you do it early.
Yes, because the prompt, like my brain started chewing on that prompt right away.
Yeah. And so I honestly had to like just physically not think about the prompt. And then we went to do it today and I'm like, oh my gosh, I had all week to think about this. And I was like, oh, because we specifically said on your work in progress. But what Jamie didn't see off camera is the three of us were like, well, we have lots of work in progresses. Like there might be one that's at the forefront, but there are lots of like things floating out there. So we let ourselves choose any character of any of our works. So
And technically, we're not supposed to have time to think about it.
True. That's why
So-
Jamie went ahead and just did it, because she's
Yeah,
like,
I
"You'll
couldn't
think
help
too much."
myself. Yeah.
If she thought too long about it, then it wouldn't feel like a real true sprint. It would have been something she had already like written in her head several times. So that's why we let her do it ahead of time. So no cheating. So
Do you want me to go first?
I would
Since-
love for you
yeah.
to go first. Go ahead, and do you have the prompt where you can share it, or you need Tina to?
No, I do not have the prompt handy.
Okay. So Tina, before you do, Piper asks, I did the sprint. Yay. If I put
Wow,
it up on my
yay.
blog, how do I tag the podcast? We would like you to, how about you start by tweeting it and then put the link in your tweet and then tag us at Christian Indie Writ. Chris Indie Writ.
Indrit, yeah.
Chris Indie Writ. And then tag us so that we can retweet it. If you do it on any other social media, like share it like you would normally share it so that your followers can see it, but tag us so that we can also share it as well. Okay, go ahead, Tina. What is today's prompt?
Write a scene in which a character from your work in progress is experiencing a trauma you or a loved one has experienced.
Okay.
Okay, so should I just read it? Yeah, I'm just gonna read it. Here we go.
You're not gonna tell us what character or what book? You're just gonna...
This is from a book I'm writing. The name, the working title right now is Analog, and this is Reese and Sage.
Great
and I will just read the scene. I will tell you it's a dystopian environment that they're in. Reese could not believe how tiny the little hand was that reached out, flailing from the bundle of blankets in Sage's arms. What are we going to do? I mean, she's going to have to eat something. She? Pretty sure she's a girl, Sage said, tenderly smoothing the top of the baby's head. Too small to tell without a diaper change, you know. I'll leave that discovery for you to make then. He's a boy, and his name is Gideon. The woman's tone was sharp as she snatched her baby away from Sage and pressed it close to her bosom. Her sudden appearance made Reese jump a bit, and he took 2 steps closer to Sage. Is he yours? Sage asked. He is ours. A man appeared, bringing a cloud of foul-smelling air into the space with them. Reese and Sage put hands to noses. Reese cursed. You smell like garbage, she told the man. These are no conditions in which to raise a family. What do you know about a family? The man pounded his chest with a meaty fist as he yelled. I feed my family. I provide clothing and shelter for them. His hand waved in the general area surrounding Reese's face and body. You spend your money on this. Things that make you look good, things that make you smell good, ridiculous nonsense. The woman started screaming, Gideon, oh God, why is he blue? Give him to me. Without waiting for a response, Sage grabbed the infant from its mother and laid it against her extended forearm. Reese watched the blanket fall to the floor as if forestalling the inevitable sight that waited for him. When he looked back at Sage, he wanted to vomit. Nothing in his life experience had prepared him for what he was witnessing. The child was limp and lifeless, his skin the shade of the evening sky over Libra Salvo. Paralyzed, he watched as Sage administered compressions with 2 fingers. As the time slowed to an almost impossible crawl, the commotion of the wailing mother and the terrified screaming father faded into a general sound Reese could only identify as terror. He watched Sage's fingers plunge downward against the fragile little body and wanted to rip him away from her, but knew at the same time he was in the safest place possible. Without knowing he was doing it, he slipped an arm around the shoulder of the weeping, frantic mother. It's going to be all right, he said stupidly. He had no right to make such a promise. The end.
Wow.
Well,
All
we
right.
have to know what happened.
Yeah. And I also want to know what this is based on. Will you tell us that story? Like,
It's just the Zachary turned blue almost immediately after he was born, and he had to be whisked away in a panicky moment of terror and horribleness.
oh,
Yep. Well, because like there's a history in our family of death with children in our family, my husband's side, and so kind of like the baby being removed from the room is no baby goes anywhere without someone, and my husband's like chasing the lady down the hall. Where are they taking the baby? You know what I mean? It was a very bad day.
wow. Great writing, Jamie. Way to do that and like put it like it. I felt like it was in your story because I've read these characters. I felt like, yeah, just so well done to take something you experience but it wasn't the same experience, but you took that emotion and that trauma and used it in your story. Good job.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of worried that you all would have really heavy stuff, so I thought I would go first because I knew it was not quite an emotional situation. So I thought it'd be better to just get out of the way.
So speaking of getting it out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and go next too, so that everyone's not hearing my voice all the time. But so mine is a little different. So we talked early on in the episode about how trauma doesn't have to mean like death, or doesn't have to mean like something as deep as what Tina has experienced, but there are different types. So, okay. She'd be pretty if she lost weight. Marnie pressed her back to the wall, willing the shadows to eat her alive. If she didn't breathe, if she didn't move, maybe by some mercy of God, they wouldn't notice her. That's rude, Lena said. She's trying very hard to lose weight. The pounding in her head intensified. That was not the response she'd expected from her best friend. Shouldn't she have argued that Marnie was pretty just the way she was? Not pointed out that she was dieting? That she was trying to get pretty? Marnie wasn't certain which statement was more hurtful. It was several moments before she realized that Lena and Neil had moved on, and she was alone. Her chest hurt from holding her breath, and she had to mentally force herself to breathe. Why was she so hurt? Hadn't she told herself this 1,000 times? Isn't the idea that she'd be more attractive the driving force behind every attempt she had made to lose weight in her entire life? Then why did it hurt so much to hear someone else say the same words that she had told herself so many times? Because it made it feel more real. She was fat. The world saw it. Even if sometimes she forgot, the truth never changed. Tears began rolling down her cheeks, but she didn't care. She hated weakness, but the crying just solidified her failure to be what she should be. She hated herself. She couldn't fix her. Why couldn't she fix herself? He's blind. Marnie jumped at the voice in the shadows. Mortified, she walked as Jake crossed the hallway toward her. She wiped at her face. Were you eavesdropping? Weren't you? Jake asked. I didn't mean to. I was just looking for Lena. Why? She clearly isn't your friend. Indignation rose in Marnie's chest. You don't know what you're talking about. I know what I just heard. That's no friend. Why? Because she spoke the truth? Truth? Are you kidding me? That wasn't truth. That was an insecure person reveling in the insult of another. Anyone who feels better about themselves by insulting another, friend or not, is a useless individual. Marnie hadn't thought about that. And Jake continued, you are so much more beautiful than she will ever be. That's why she 3, 2, 1.
She what?
Yeah, right.
Oh, that's wonderful. So that happened to you, Jennifer?
It's very similar when I
Whose
was
butt am I gonna go kick?
right. When I was in high school, I had this huge crush on this kid at camp, like for a few years in a row. He was tall, he was a basketball player, dark and
All
dark
the important
complected.
things.
Yeah, right. So, but he was a Christian, so it made it okay that I
Well,
thought
there
him
you go.
physically attractive, right? And I had a friend. She wasn't my best friend, but she knew, and so she's like, "I'm gonna talk to him. There's no way that he won't have a crush on you." And I'm like, "What?" And so, anyways, I didn't want her to, and then she did. I didn't overhear it, but she came back and told me exactly what he said. And it was like, and that's what he said. Like, yeah, she'd be pretty if she'd lose some weight.
Aw.
Yeah. And this friend who was very honest, very blunt, she said, that she's like, well, I told him you were trying. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like I knew that I had told myself that, like, I mean, I thought myself fat my whole life, but to hear someone else say it was like so much more hurtful because as a teenager, you just tear yourself apart anyway. But to hear someone else tear you apart was like, it was devastating to me. The positive note is, as an adult, years later, that guy's best friend came to be the youth pastor at my church, and he and I became friends. Like we kind of knew who each other were at camp, but we never talked or anything. And he didn't really. Actually, I knew who he was. He really didn't have a clue who I was. And we got talking about. I never told him this story, but we got talking about this guy and that how he was one of his best friends. He's like, everybody had a crush on him, which I didn't realize. And he's like, and I told him what the guy had said, and he laughed so hard. He's like, and then he pulled the guy up on Facebook, and the guy was extremely overweight and out of shape and balding. And so I just felt like, okay, so I had him on this pedestal, and he's no different than me, right? So anyway, so that is something I experienced, and now I think it would, as Jennifer in her 40s, I would react to that situation way differently than insecure Jennifer at 16. So.
Yeah, I mean, we
good.
felt it. Talk about putting trauma into a story. We absolutely all knew exactly what she was feeling and what she was going through. And I really like how you have the good guy save the day. Oh, you're such a romance writer. Here he is to tell her how wonderful she is.
It had to be a work in progress. And this is that snarky painting class girl.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't know how I'm going to fit this in, but I kind of always thought that she would just be like, yeah. So, but thank you everybody for all the comments I'm seeing in the in all the people that are relating to this. I see you, I feel you. So, yeah, it's so different though when you get to college. People view beauty totally different, and then when you get out of college, again, like it's not so much the skinny cheerleader. People like start to see people for really who they are, and growing up is just so much better. I would never go back to my teen years.
My husband likes to joke about how dad bods are the big thing.
You're like, they are with me, honey. That's funny. All right, Tina, how about you go next?
Okay, well, I chose a different trauma than the one we've been talking about today, just because I just thought it would be too much. So this is from my Civil War story, and the names might be different because I couldn't remember what they were on the fly.
I always do that too.
So here we go. Priscilla could not enjoy the sweet breeze that cooled the black back of her neck or the sounds of birdsong in the trees. In fact, she wished they would be quiet, and she wished a storm would begin brewing to block out the sunshine. There should be no sunshine and birdsong on a day like today. She concentrated on the sound of the shovel as it scraped into the dirt and the sound of it being plopped onto the growing mound. You should go inside, miss, said Ezekiel, or at least go sit down in the shade. Priscilla only shook her head, trying hard to keep her shoulders from shaking and to ignore the tears that were streaming down her cheeks. Ezekiel studied her for a moment before turning his sweat-soaked back to her and continuing to dig. It should be me in there doing the digging, Priscilla thought to herself. Why should Ezekiel, who has only known the cold, hard side of her father, be the one to dig his grave? There was something unjust about it. She had known the kind side of the man, the side who bounced her on his knee when she was little, and always tweaked her curls even after she was almost grown. Ezekiel, come out of there, please, she said. He dutifully climbed out and gave her a quizzical expression. It should be me, she managed to choke out, and reached for the shovel. But Ezekiel held it tight and wouldn't let go. No, ma'am, he replied firmly. Nobody should have to dig their own father's grave. Leastways, a lady not used to such work. Priscilla opened her mouth to protest, but Ezekiel had her by the elbow, and he escorted her back up onto the broad porch of the house and into a chair. You stay right there, he said, and disappeared into the house. Priscilla was too stunned to move. Then he reappeared again with a glass of lemonade. The grief you're feeling has affected your thinking, Miss Priscilla. Now you just sit right here and rest while I do what needs doing. Then he was gone again, walking resolutely across the yard to the spot under the maple where they would lay Daddy to rest.
Wow.
Okay, so I know you didn't dig your dad's grave, so I would really love to know what trauma, like where you pulled this from, because that was beautiful.
Well, I just remember when my dad passed away, and he was in Alaska at the time, and I was here, and it just didn't seem real. I remember it didn't seem real until I walked into the church, and they had the table set up, and they had the little thing with all the pictures on it.
Yeah.
And they had a picture of him because he was in the Navy, in his naval uniform. And then there was like a pew. It was a Catholic church, and there was a pew against the back wall. And I just sat down on the pew, and I just started crying because, like, that moment, it hit me that he was gone. He really was gone. So, and I still forget sometimes.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah,
But
I
sometimes
still
walk in here.
pick up the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody kind of has that experience too.
Mhm.
Yeah, so although I didn't dig his grave, I just went with the trauma of losing your father and tried to make it fit Priscilla's world.
Yeah.
Or
That was a
whoever her
great
name
story.
is that I can't remember.
I like Priscilla. I think you named her something different, but I like Priscilla really well. I feel like it fits the character and the story that you're writing there. So
Mhm.
yeah, love it. Lots of great comments too. Again, Tina, you're gonna have a lot of comments to read after this. So
Yeah,
and
I really like the whole pacing of Southern living or whatever for your writer's voice, Tina. I think that they're very well suited for each other.
yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Last but never least.
Oh,
Rhonda
yes. I had the
Hagerman.
least amount of words. Yes. I
No.
sat there for, I didn't, we aren't supposed to think about it. So I actually didn't even really know what the sprint was until we just started. And I was having the hardest time.
Oh
You
no.
know how much I don't like hurting my characters anyway. So
Yes, we should have talked about that in the episode too, but
Mhm.
because it is hard, but it makes it
Yeah.
better. Yep.
Yeah. So, all right, here we go. Mom, Sparky just got hit by a car. I wailed into the receiver, hoping that she would know how to soothe this hurt in that special way she has. She has always had a way of making childhood wrongs right. Stacy was crying so hard on my shoulder, though, that I was going to miss any words of wisdom Mom had for us. Honey, sit here for just a second so I can hear Grammy. I reluctantly slid the child off my hip and onto the bench. This child, at 10 years old, is almost my height already and every day looking more like an adult. Usually, anyway. Today, she barely looks her own age. Her eyes are swollen, snot is running out of her nose, and is already covering the back of one of her sleeves. She's sniveling, almost hyperventilating. I have to say I'm proud of her. She's handling this tragedy much better than I did when I lost my puppy, and she's much younger than I was. I was trying to find him. I was calling him. Stacy was starting to calm. Her words were staccato but soft. I barely made out her words, but I wasn't going to interrupt her for a little volume. The gate was open, so I knew he wasn't in our yard. As far as I got.
Mm. Gosh, I was right there. We lost a dog, but because I grew up on M15. For those of you who don't know this area, it's a fairly busy 2-lane highway, and we lost a dog that way. Man, it's hard when you're a kid.
Yeah.
It's hard when you're a mom and your 10-year-old kid is almost as big as you are. That was my relatable moment.
Yeah. Right.
Didn't you have a dog that was actually like stolen from your yard, Rhonda?
Yes, my daughter's dog Willow. Oh my word! Willow was just on the corner of our yard. We lived on a corner lot, and this woman stopped and coasted her into her yard or into her vehicle from my yard, and then posted on Facebook about an hour later. This dog was running wild in the street, and so whatever. Posted it was a lost dog. I just couldn't believe it. But when I was 10, our dog was hit. My brother and I were playing in the front yard.
Oh.
And we, what we did, he liked to chase cars. He was a little cockapoo. And so when a car would come by, we would run to the backyard as fast as we could, and he would chase us. And because a leash, we didn't even know what a leash was, I don't think, at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But
let's talk just real quick before we wrap this up. But you don't like to hurt your characters.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to start thinking about reframing that. What if you could look at, okay, how am I going to write this triumph in my character, or how they are going to like how they would at the end, like what they're going to overcome, or how it's make them so much better, and then backtrack into the trauma. Because then you're not hurting them, you're getting them to a place where you can like elevate them and show like how awesome they are.
Well, I know what you're saying about that. And I do sort of do what you're saying. But the thing is, I never start it until it's already passed. It's the actual writing of the actual emotion fresh. That's where I just never do a good job.
Yeah, it's hard. It is definitely hard.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That was awesome. Thank you, everyone. And there's lots of great comments too in there that you need to read too, Rhonda. But okay. So just like we start every one of our episodes with what's up, we're going to end this with another trip around the virtual roundtable. And we ask each one of us what's next, whether it's making ourselves publicly accountable for a professional goal we set or promoting an upcoming event. We're just letting everyone know what shenanigans you'll be getting up into those long days before the next time we are together. So let's just go backwards in the direction we came. Let's start with you, Rhonda.
Okay. So what I'm doing this week is I'm trying to get into marketing. I really hate marketing. I'm not a salesperson. And so I've been doing a little study about this book that we put out a couple weeks ago. Now that that's finished, starting the marketing. And part of learning when to do the marketing is part of it, like potentially marketing before it's actually out. So people are aware of it before it comes out. And I mean, there's so much, I've got so many thoughts swirling in my mind. That's what I'm working on this week coming up.
All right. How about you, Tina?
I am continuing with the edits of my book, and it goes pretty quickly until I get to those places where I've left the emotion out of Angelica's reactions. So it's going pretty quickly right now, but I know that there's a scene coming up. I'm gonna have to slow down and take it moment by moment again. So that's my goals.
All right. Piper says that her what's up is she's writing her midpoint.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as Tina. My edits are going really great until I get to a hard part. And then it slows. I look at it like, this is going so great. I'm gonna be done by tonight with my whole edits. No, it's gonna be a while. So I am, for the coming week, I'm going to continue to show up for our office hours every day, and I'm just trudging through it. And when I get to good, like easy points, it goes pretty quick. And then when I get to hard points, it could take me a few days on one scene. So that's where I'm at. So I don't really have a whole lot to report, but I am moving forward. So that's encouraging, and I'm really glad to see. And I'm excited about it again. Jamie asked me. Yeah, Jamie asked me earlier. She's like, maybe do you think that you need to go to something you're more excited about? And I'm like, no, I'm excited about this. It's just hard. Editing is hard, but I'm so much more excited for this story than I was a couple months ago. So that's always good. Shell says that she started a 100-day writing challenge. I don't feel ready to work on a full novel yet, so just trying to write every day and hope that exercise will bring. Yes, get that brain glowing. Sage says that she's doing a spill or quill on Kaylin Rivers' channel on Sunday at 2 p.m. She has a lot of brain juju, but brain is not cooperating. So I don't know what spiller quill is, but I'm definitely going to look that up, Sage. That's awesome. Congratulations. All right, J.R. Nichols.
I am so excited about my book. So I'm going to keep on working on my edits. It's slow and hard work, but it's really accomplishing a lot. I can't believe how good it feels to have the beginning locked down and tucked away, and it's just a whole exciting, different feeling. So now now I can't wait for people to get their hands on it, but not yet because it's not fully finished. So,
all right, that's awesome. One last one. Robin says her goal for the week is to finish the things that got abandoned in May and start working on a new project if I can find a plot. Oh, girl, been there. And then Jason says, starting to use the book more, meaning Rhonda's book, I'm assuming, to help structure my book better. Hope to write 5 chapters this week. That's
wow,
awesome,
that's a
Jason.
huge goal. That's awesome.
Yeah, very cool.
I'm so happy everyone's finding your book useful and
Me too.
using it. And
yeah.
Yeah, do you have a copy
awesome.
there? Hold it up and say the name of the book is
Right here. This is my proof copy, so it's got that on it.
all right. Available on Amazon or what?
Amazon. Yep.
Hold it up there a little bit longer so people can write it down. It is called Plot Your Novel with This Workbook by D.D. Bauman. All right. Great episode, ladies. All right. This concludes the Christian Indie Writers Podcast. So until next week, may your pen be prolific, may your deadlines be met, and may all of your words honor Christ.
Bye now.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.